I'm gonna be honest. This video is a case of a lot of small things lining up perfectly to create one big thing. Which is to say that while I was at SGDQ a few weeks back, my entire personality became shovelware Korra because I'm the only person stupid enough to play it. And I'd brought it for a friend to play. Combine that with the fact that while my friends and I were hunting around the nearby retro game store, I found this thing for something like $4 and thought, man, shovelware is so funny, I think I'll buy it. And look where we are now. I feel like I should emphasize the fact that I do in fact play good games. Like, my current casual game is Xenogears, it's just that shovelware has some weird grip on me. So, with how well my Korra video did, I guess I'm back once again to talk about licensed shovelware. Now, where do I begin with The Last Airbender? Well, I guess I should mention that this is based off of M. Night Shyamalan's Last Airbender movie that came out back in 2010. The game actually released June 29th that year, while the movie was in box offices starting July 1st, so it would seem that they wanted the game to release at the same time as the movie, meaning it was probably rushed and thus a horrible game, right? Well, not really. Okay, well, the game definitely falls under licensed shovelware, however, the game I played was still enjoyable, to some extent. And to be completely transparent, I do not know if the Wii version of the game is much better or worse, I just know that the DS game is passable in quality. However, there are weird aspects that come into play with this being a licensed game for the movie of all things. Now, before I speak any further on this, I need to admit something. I managed to live my life without watching the Last Airbender movie up until this moment, as I decided I should watch the movie as research for this game. The results? Movie mediocre. Not as bad as others hyped it up to be, but still pretty bad. Now, as for the game itself, it does in fact keep up with the story of the movie. However, it's very clear that the people who worked on this game were fans of, or at the very least watched, the cartoon. There are various moments in this game where they completely ignore how it goes down in the movie and instead bring in the old dialogue and goofiness of the show. The devs have my eternal gratitude for this, as it turns various moments from boring, wow, I hate this version of these characters, to, yo, it's classic Sokka, I love classic Sokka. These moments also show up with random no-name NPCs. I kind of adore the little moments they put in this game. There is otherwise very little to talk about in terms of story, because, I'll spoil it now, this game is about 3 hours long, so yeah, there's not much to say there. The gameplay is where it's at. Throughout the game you'll play as Zuko and Aang, and the two of them have different movesets. These movesets each contain a basic attack, 4 bending abilities, and a special movement ability. Starting with Zuko, his basic attack is swords, along with his bending abilities of fireball, flipping tables, dodge rolling, and bombs. And his movement ability is parkour. Now, looking at this moveset, I never used his table flipping skill. His dodge roll was more of a hindrance than it was a help, except when the game forces you to use it. And the fireball was also rarely used except for, boss fights. On the other hand, the basic attack obviously works as well as you would expect, especially when upgraded. And the bombs? Those were great. Except for one moment later in the game. We'll get to that when it comes. But what really shines in Zuko's moveset is his parkour. It honestly feels really good running through various parkour sections once you get the hang of it. At least if you play the game on a large screen. Doing so on the tiny DS screen is less fun. I realize I should probably explain how movement works in this game. See, the only control here is the stylus. Yeah, that's right, you play the entire game on the bottom screen. Your character can be moved around by clicking and dragging with the stylus, kind of like when playing something like Baldur's Gate 3 on PC. But specifically, the click and hold kind of movement, where your character chases your cursor. Now, while I did say this game is controlled entirely with a stylus, I lied just a little bit. It would be possible to play this game one-handed were it not for bending abilities. Which is sad. I think we deserve more accessibility in games. However, unlike a certain Kid Icarus game, The Last Airbender is accessible to people of any handedness. If you can't already tell from the footage, I am in fact cross-dominant, and I learned how to write with my left hand. This means I usually favor using my left hand for any precision movement, such as with a stylus. And I can thankfully play the game left-handed, as you enter your bending stance by pressing down either L or R. So, all the right-handed players can hold down L, while left-handed players can hold down R to do bending. This is honestly one of my favorite aspects of the game that I noticed while playing. The game even points it out in Zuko's parkour tutorial, which I thought was kind of cute. And it goes to show that the devs really were thinking about lefties when designing the controls. Anyways, now that I've sufficiently talked about an amazing aspect of this game that only applies to like 10% of gamers, let's talk about Aang. Aang has his basic attack of like air jabs or something, along with the long-range air slice, the ability to lift objects with air, an air push, and the water whip. As for his movement ability, it's gliding. Like, what else would you do with him if not gliding? Unlike with Zuko, all of Aang's moves obviously get used one way or another for puzzles, and even then, all of them have fun uses in combat when applicable. This makes sense in a way, though. You spend equal amounts of time playing as Zuko and Aang, but their focuses are entirely different. With Zuko, his missions tend to be combat-focused, with a nice side of parkour-related puzzles and some mirror puzzles at the end of the game. As for Aang, his levels are more based on puzzles. Every now and again he may end up in combat, but it's really just puzzle time for Aang. And it kind of makes sense with him being more of a pacifist fun guy who only fights when necessary, and makes it fun when he does. Which is a great segue into the level design. It's not bad. A majority of the game is basically puzzles and little challenges or fetch quests you're sent off to do. And while they can be annoying in games, it was kind of fun here. I think the game only being 3 hours really adds to it. Because the game is so short and sweet, it really doesn't have a chance to sit around and get dull. I'd like to say this game is like the antithesis to Core Fire Emblem. A new era begins, suffers from dragging on too long with the basics programmed into just barely give a working experience. If I were to talk about it as a game prototype, it would be a horizontal slice, meaning you see everything in the game that it'll have to offer, it simply has yet to be fleshed out or perfected. Meanwhile, The Last Airbender here is a surprisingly short game that's extremely well fleshed out. It feels good and polished, like a small part of a larger game, or what we may call a vertical slice in development, which is to say a prototype that shows a fully fleshed out section of a game. You don't see everything, but you have a good idea of what the game will feel like to play if expanded upon. Or in more basic terms, it's like a demo for a larger project. Considering I enjoyed the bad Core Fire Emblem game, this is essentially my game dev equivalent of praise, at least in terms of what shovelware can provide. For a game that was likely rushed to meet a very specific deadline, The Last Airbender is pretty high quality, and I think the short game was likely a purposeful decision so the devs could make what little there was as good as possible. Though not everything about this game is good. To get this criticism out of the way, the character models look trash can adjacent. Like, I get it. The DS screens are tiny. It's like looking at 2 postage stamps. And it's not super powerful. Hell, my game lagged when I was fighting the final boss due to how much stuff was on screen. However, I also know it's possible to not make 3D models look super trash on the DS. I watched Trauma Center speedruns The models look pretty good, even on the DS games. Though I guess the models aren't too complex in those games. Still though, I don't really think the DS is built great for 3D games. If someone wants to prove me wrong with some amazing game on the DS that uses 3D models, be my guest. But the DS was still a time of 2D art in games, like Pokemon Black and White were still using pixel art. I will admit that it's impressive for the game to run as well as it does with the models it's using, and the way things are animated in this game can add to the humor of it all. But at the same time, this choice made the game look so bad. However, there is one aspect of the art I would love to praise, that being the little movies. I just adore this specific art style. Anytime a game has cutscenes that mimic some sort of comic or painting style, I am immediately in love. The next major issue I have, though, is with the boss fights. There are 3 in the entire game. 1 boss fight for Aang, and 2 for Zuko. Aang's boss fight is one I have no problems with. It's kind of fun, if I'm being completely honest. Zuko's boss fights, however, suck. Both of them come at the end of the game, and they are the only times in the entire game where you're supposed to make use of the top screen. The first of these fights is against Katara. Now, the idea of how this fight works is fun on paper. Essentially, she's on the top screen and hurling ice at you. You need to attack her until her damage meter fills up, at which point she defends herself with a tidal wave. When this occurs, you need to step on the button at the bottom of the arena to flip around the 3 mirrors around Katara. Shoot a fireball at a mirror to bounce it off and hit Katara. Do this 3 times and you win the battle. Pretty simple, right? Well, there are a few issues with this, and all of them come from the fact that we're dealing with a split-screen situation here. Hitting Katara as she's attacking you is easy enough. However, you have to aim at the mirrors from an angle so that Katara isn't blocking them and to guarantee the rebound hitting her. Trying to shoot across 2 screens at an angle is extremely difficult to do. Being precise with such a small target meant it took me quite a while before I could hit the mirror. And even then, there was no guarantee that the rebound would hit Katara. If I'm not standing at the perfect angle, then the fireball completely misses her. The mirror puzzles worked on their own for a reason. That reason being it was all one screen, and the puzzles usually clearly defined a location to stand for the perfect rebound. In an open arena like this, though, it's impossible to find that position, which is why the idea of this battle seems fine on paper but is otherwise poorly executed. Zuko's second battle is against Xiao. This battle is all about filling up Xiao's rage meter by attacking him, after which he will drop a firebomb. You need to catch this bomb and then flick it up to the top screen in order to hit a pillar, making it fall on Xiao. Now, if you remember my complaints about the Katara fight, then you can already see my first issue here. Obviously being the whole aiming your attack on a precise location that's at an angle, it sucks. The second issue is specific to the firebomb ability. See, the way the firebomb works is that you click and drag it around the screen, allowing you to drop it places. It can also be thrown, though, if you manage to flick it across the screen. Problem is, I had a really hard time flicking the bomb. This may be an issue specific to me, but it's annoying as hell. Sometimes I would flick it and it just drops there. Other times I actually manage it only to miss. So yeah, combining these 2 issues makes the boss fight annoying as hell. However, once you defeat Xiao, the game is over. So, after all this, I think I can confidently say The Last Airbender is a pretty good game, at least in terms of licensed shovelware. The gameplay feels pretty good, most of the time, along with the game having its highs and lows. Were this game any longer, I feel like I'd probably begin to hate it. But its short run makes it enjoyable for the time you get to experience it. It's clear the devs knew they wouldn't have the time to make a long and amazing game, so they got their priorities straight. They knew to focus on quality over quantity, and it really makes the game shine. If anything, I can recommend this as the best way to watch M. Night Shyamalan's The Last Airbender, because there isn't an idiot saying Avatar Ong in your ear all the time.
Good!